Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now show, the voice of the DSO industry. Kim Larson and Bill Newman talk to industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. Visit groupdentistrynow.com for more DSO analysis, news, and events. Looking for a job or have a job to fill? Visit joindso.com. We hope you enjoy today's show.
And I'd like to welcome everyone to the Group Dentistry Now show. I'm Bill Newman. And in this episode of the Group Dentistry Now show, we have somebody that I don't think really needs an introduction to about 99.7% of the people listening, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Most people know Brian Colao, but if you don't, Brian is the director of Dykema's Dental Service Organizations Industry Group. And I'm not going to go into his entire bio because he has one of the longest bios I think I've ever seen, and it's well justified. Brian has been in the dental space for approximately 25 years. So he's been in the industry for 2.5 decades. It's amazing. Widely regarded as one of the foremost authorities in the United States on, I would say, all things DSO. I'll tell you a couple of the things that he focuses on, but only a couple because there are a lot. DSO formation, DSO business structures, M&A, regulatory compliance for DSOs, and that includes corporate practice of dentistry, illegal fee splitting, advertising regulations, laboratory regulations, patient financing, etc. So Brian has, and Brian did ask me to mention this, and I'm thankful that he did, that he was named one of our DSO influencers to watch back in 2019. And he's written several articles for us and contributed to some other articles that we've done in the past. And really, I think Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you contributed to an article right around when we first started back in 2015, maybe 2016. And it was really on that first generation of DSOs and how a lot of the DSOs or group practices at the time, publicly traded ones, there were some lawsuits wrapped around that. So there was really informative article, and we still get a lot of activity on that article to this day. So again, welcome Brian Colao to the Group Dentistry Now show.
Thanks, Bill. And I just want to tell you, it's my pleasure to be on here today. And thank you for everything you've been doing during this pandemic to keep the DSO industry informed. I've just been listening to a lot of your podcasts and looking at a lot of your content, and I just want to thank you for everything you've been doing.
Sure, it's strange times, which we'll talk about, and who would have thought that the recession-proof or near recession-proof dental industry would be devastated with something like this. Nobody would have predicted this, and actually, you were one of the contributors to the 2019 recap and the 2020 predictions. So we're going to work on a redo of the 2020 predictions because we did those in January. And so now, of course, we have to redo it because what's going to happen? What's going to happen in 2020 and in 2021? And we'll talk a little bit about that in this podcast. Brian, first, tell us a little bit more, tell the audience a little bit more, the ones that don't know, about Dykema and the team there. What do you do for the dental industry as a team and also the DSO industry specifically?
Yeah, no, so I'm an attorney, and I've been in the dental space 25 years, and I supervise a team of 40 attorneys that specialize 100% in healthcare, and 20 of my team members are 100% dentistry. They focus 100% of their practices on dentistry, all the things you kind of mentioned during the introduction. But, the bottom line is we represent, I believe, 375 plus in excess of 375 DSOs in all 50 states and 6 Canadian provinces. And, pretty much any possible conceivable legal issue that could impact a DSO, we handle.
It's interesting because we get people that reach out to us from time to time, DSOs, with various questions, and a lot of times I'll send them over to you, and you're already in conversations with them, so you do know just about everybody in the industry.
Well, that's certainly my goal. It's a little more challenging when we can't go to our dental conferences and see everybody. But I'm grateful for at this. On the one hand, I'm sick of Zoom and ready to throw it out the window. But on the other hand, I'm very grateful for Zoom and other virtual mediums, so at least we can still try to network as best we can. But no doubt we're in a very challenging circumstance now. Normally at this time of year, we'd be getting ready for our industry leading conference next week. So it's a little sentimental for me. We were going to have 1,000 people, yourself and Kim included, coming to Dallas for our conference. And now we're just going to have to make the best of these virtual events.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the podcast. But you did one virtual event that was highly successful. I really enjoyed it. I love the format. It was about as engaging and as you can be with the limitations that we have with virtual events, and certainly educational. And yeah, I know you've got some things planned for later on in the year virtually, and then hopefully some things planned in 2021 that will be live and we'll be able to get back together again. But let's talk about, I think, some real pressing issues and concerns the DSOs have right now in group practices. We've had this recent surge of COVID cases in some states, and you're from Dallas, and so you're certainly seeing that in the state of Texas. So tell me a little bit about what you and your team are seeing and hearing from clients about the current state of affairs for practitioners. What are you seeing here?
Well, I mean, to me, it's very simple, Bill. It begins and ends with the dental offices have to remain open. Okay, and I just know for certain we're going to talk a little bit about that today. If you don't even ask me the questions, I'm going to start talking about how essential dentistry is and how the practices have got to stay open. I don't think you want to do that the first 2 minutes here, but you're going to hear from me today on that. But generally, it begins and ends with these offices have to remain open. I joke a lot, but I'm serious. If the dental offices remain open, the DSO industry is going to be fine. They can ruin our lives, Bill. I mean, this is where I'm joking. They can shut down the NFL. They can shut down Major League Baseball. We can't go have a drink at a bar. No rock concerts are allowed anymore. They can shut down the restaurants. But if the dental offices remain open and they're safe and the patients believe they're safe, the impact on the DSO industry is going to be very, very minimal. The sad thing about all this is that's not what happened. What happened was, for the first time in the history of the dental industry, at least during my lifetime and most people's lifetimes that were even considerably older than me, the government told you couldn't go to the dentist unless you had an emergency. And that has never happened. So dentistry has been virtually recession-proof throughout its history, but everybody's got an Achilles heel or a little weakness, and at least this time around, it was not pandemic-proof. And the key for everything that's got to happen, I mean, yes, you've got to make the practices safe, and I can talk about that, and I believe they are safe. And yes, the patients have to believe the practices are safe, because if they are safe but they don't believe they're safe, they're not going to come back. But those two things, I think we've done a great job during the reopening of, one, making the practices in fact safe, and two, most patients. A recent poll by the ADA said at least 73% of the patients believe, it's definitely safe enough to come back, and they're not, canceling appointments. So, there's some improvement there, but largely we've done a good job. And in a few more weeks, we're going to do an even better job. The elephant in the room, or the other shoe that might drop, is if these cases keep spiking, will they go back to a scenario where they ask dental offices to close? And if that happens, that could be potentially very damaging, obviously, to the industry, and that cannot happen. I mean, that's not even something I want to even entertain. We have to spend every waking hour literally making sure that we never get to a situation where these dental offices close again. But in terms of, what we're seeing right now, it's encouraging. How the first part of the pandemic, Bill, it was about how do we lay people off? Do we furlough them? Do we lay them off? How do we get our PPP loans in place? I mean, really depressing stuff. I was busy, but it was not. It was very depressing. Now it's how do we invite the workforce back and comply with the labor and employment regulations? How do we get our PPP loans forgiven. How do we navigate a situation where if somebody tests positive, we're not closing the office down, but how do we safely, navigate the regular, who do we have to report to? What is our obligations, if somebody tests positive? Because in a lot of places, it's going to happen. I mean, I know that they get upset at us at the CDC if we compare this to the flu, but the flu's a coronavirus. This is a coronavirus. Maybe this is a novel one, but in the end of the day, this is going to morph, I think, Bill, it's just a question of how long it takes, into a situation where you're just going to have to live with it. We've never, to my knowledge, shut down dental offices on a wide-scale basis because people got the flu. Dentistry has been dealing with infectious diseases since, a very long time, but it really got serious during the AIDS crisis in the 80s. That's when PPP started to come out. You've got tuberculosis, you've got hepatitis A, you've got hepatitis B, you've got the regular flu, and nobody is better than the dental office at handling that. And this whole idea that somehow it was unsafe, and by the way, Bill, there's not a single statistic out there that anybody can cite to that say the transmission rates are any higher in the dental offices than any place else, but somehow it got to a situation where they shut the offices down. And I told you I wasn't going to rant and rave in the first 5 minutes, but I've broken that rule. I started ranting and raving in the first 5 minutes because I think the key to all of this is the dental offices got to remain open.
Well, yeah, and I think and you're fine ranting and raving, so that's fine. I think it's extremely justified, and I also think that it's very timely given the recent surge in COVID cases in some states. And, you hear rumblings from governors and mayors and saying that they may start to, well, they already are, right? They closed the bars down in Texas, right? They were open and now they're not open again. So, what else could possibly happen next? And so we don't know. And so you're right. I think there has to be, hey, we are essential as an industry, and we can practice dentistry safely. Have you seen or heard anything specific to dental in any states, whether it's from government or whether it's just from maybe some skittish clinicians that want to close things down again or just remain open for emergency care only?
Yeah, I have. On a wide scale basis, no. I mean, the good news is so far, none of the governments are making any rumblings about, closing dental offices down. And I think that's great. And I think because we've told them after, I think this horrible mistake was made where they shut down the offices, lots and lots of meetings. I participated in some. We told them no place is safer practically than the dental office. I suppose if you lock yourself in your house and crawl under your bed, under the covers and never leave, that might be number one. But the dental office is like a real close second to that because everybody's got PPE on. You could go to a bar. I mean, I feel bad for the bar owners, but if you walked into a bar and everybody had an N95 mask and they had a hazmat suit on and they had gloves on, you could probably, I don't know how you drink, but you could go to a bar and talk to people and it would probably be okay. The problem is that's not practical. Nobody's going to a bar to do that. Nobody's going to a rock concert to do that. So unfortunately, that's why those businesses are going to get hit the hardest. And I feel bad for those folks, but there's just no way around that. But a dental office is not a party, okay? It never was. Nobody's listening to rock music and dancing around and throwing back shots. I mean, that, at least not at my dentist. That's not what happens there. You walk in and you get treated, and everybody, I went to the dentist and I put it on my podcast series, and I had my dentist, Bill, on my podcast series, Dr. Lohman. She talked a little bit about the whole thing. And, you go there, and 1, they take your temperature. 2, they had me wait in the car. 3, everybody had, N95 masks on and gloves. 4, they had fans blowing for air circulation. 5, I had to do a pre-rinse with peroxide, which deactivates the virus. By the time and they hand scale, they didn't use the Cavitron. By the time all that was over with, I couldn't think of a safer place. It might have been safer than in my house under the covers because I don't have PPE at my house.
That's true. Yeah, good, very good points. Yeah, it's. I think it's really interesting, and let's just hope that, to your point, that we don't backstep and close down offices again or limit to emergency only care. So you mentioned a couple of requests that come into the DSO team at Dykema that have been coming in, and how they've shifted from, on the employment side anyway, from furloughs and laying people off to, how do you bring employees back now? So talk a little bit more about that, and then maybe some other general business related questions as practices open back up. I know that there's, the PPP, and I know recently that, there's some provider relief. There's a provider relief fund, and that was really relegated just to Medicaid and Medicaid managed care. But I think that's been expanded, which is really interesting. And I think a lot of dentists are going to be, and DSOs are going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's a little bit messy out there, Bill. And I mean, I guess it's messy everywhere. I mean, this is not a political show, and I have no intention of getting political on here other than to say, I think most people can agree, various governments have not worked well with each other to solve this problem. And it's been very, very messy. And, the federal government has not always been in sync with the state governments. And you've got some state governments that are pretending this isn't happening. Some are locking everything down. So that has led to a very messy environment. I'm not passing judgment. That's for the politicians. But from a legal standpoint, when I'm advising practices, it's messy out there, right? You have PPP loans that people took advantage of. You have disaster relief loans. Now you've got this healthcare provider relief fund, which is 2% for Medicaid, but they're expanding it. Then you've got enhanced unemployment. And the reason this becomes an issue is I asked the question, because I was, even as a lawyer in the space for 25 years, I sat down with our labor and employment specialist and I said, why do I got to meet with you about inviting employees back? Aren't they happy to come back? Don't we call them and they just come back? Why are we having a meeting on this? And they're like, no. It's in fact very complicated. One, some of them are taking unemployment and actually were making more money on unemployment than they were in the office. And what happens if you tell them to come back and they say, we don't want to come back, we want to earn unemployment? Do you then fire them? Do they then lose their enhanced benefits or not? And these are open questions. There's not I'll just tell everybody, there's not a straight, there's not a clear-cut answer for that. Then it comes down to, what if an employee tells you, they've got an elderly person at home and they're worried about coming to the office? Or what if your employee is over 60 years old and they're worried about getting it and they're afraid to come back? Do you have the right to fire them? How do you handle that situation? So this has given rise, Bill, to a real messy situation. And by the way, all these questions, there are not clear-cut answers to them. You got to sit down with your lawyer and go case by case and figure out, what the best solution is. But the overarching theme that I'm telling my clients is, and I don't mind sharing this, on your show, is we got to keep the offices open. I can't guarantee that somebody's not going to get sued for something or some employee's not going to do something. But the alternative of just shutting the offices down until this pandemic passes is just unacceptable. I don't think there's anybody. Maybe if we've got one of your listeners that's independently wealthy and just says, I don't need to earn any money, so I'm just going to keep my thing closed until it's all over with because I don't have to make a living. All right, maybe that person can do it, but that's like one in, 100,000 or something. The rest of us that have to, work for a living, you can't shut them down. You're just going to have to navigate these, and people have to understand there's going to be legal issues. You're going to get labor and employment complaints. People are going to contest unemployment benefits. You're probably going to get sued before it's all over with, and we're just going to have to work through those. But the alternative to shutting it all down, we're not going to shut it down. We're just going to have to navigate some of these legal issues going forward.
Absolutely. So beyond those questions, I am sure this is a question that you're getting quite a bit. We actually did a webinar about 2 months ago when things first started to, I'd say maybe it was May timeframe, so a couple months into the pandemic, a month and a half in, regarding practice valuations. So I'm sure you're getting questions there. So from that perspective, let's talk a little bit about what questions are you getting? What are the answers? What are you hearing? Is a solo practice? If I'm a solo practitioner, I'm looking to sell my practice to a DSO. Where do I stand? Can I even do that now? And then, what's the value of my DSO? Has it gone down? Is private equity interested? There's a lot of really. And then if everything's in limbo right now, how long do we have to wait until things get back to pre-COVID, if they get back to them?
Yeah, so a couple things on that. I do get all those questions. Everything you said, I get several times probably even a day. I was going to say several times a week, but honestly, probably almost several times a day. I get just about every question you just went through there. So this is where we start. To try to give some clarity to an otherwise messy situation. We start with, remember, this is a public health crisis, but it's not a financial crisis like in 2007. So the reason that's important is the financial markets are fluid. They're running normally. Now, a bank may elect not to allow a loan in a certain situation, but they're running, okay? In 2007, the markets all shut down and we were incapable. Like, you couldn't get a loan. I remember the very famous, if you saw that movie Too Big to Fail, General Electric said, we sell light bulbs. We're one of the most profitable companies in America, and we can't get a loan because it's not possible to get a loan. Now, it's possible to get a loan today. The markets are not shut down. So that's the first thing, because that means there's a lot of money on the sideline and there's a lot of interest from buyers. There continues to be a lot of interest from sellers. So the question becomes, is it in your best interest, buyer or seller, to do a transaction right now? And because you know this, Bill, because you've been in this space for a long time, not all DSOs are equal. Some were doing a lot better pre-COVID, and some were doing a lot worse pre-COVID. And now that COVID hit, some are recovering better. Some are not recovering. A couple are going out of business or filing bankruptcy. So it really depends on the organization. But the three principles, I would say, when I first get questions about valuation are: one, this is a health crisis. It's not a financial crisis. So there's money out there to invest. So don't worry about that. Two, there is great interest from buyers. They are interested. A whole industry has now evolved on the DSO side about very sophisticated business development folks whose sole job, and they've all got MBAs from wonderful business schools, and their whole job is to do dental transactions. So there's no way they're sitting on the sideline. They want to do deals and are interested in doing deals. And, just about every seller that wanted to sell before wants to sell now. As you pointed out, some might want to sell even more now than they did before because of this mess. So the environment is fine for M&A. The question becomes, what's going on with your organization, your individual organization? Because I've got clients that are 110% of where they were COVID. I've got clients whose business was on such an upward trajectory that even not doing any business besides emergencies in April and May, they're still ahead now of where they were last year at this time. So if you're one of those folks, you can do a pre-COVID deal right now and get just as much money as you would pre-COVID. If you're somebody else and you've recovered 75, 80%, you might have to take a little bit of a haircut, not because the M&A market dried up, not because people are not interested. The reason you're taking a haircut if you do a deal now is because of EBITDA. You remember, Bill, it all comes down to a multiple of EBITDA. And if your EBITDA is 20% less now than it was pre-COVID, you're just going to take a haircut, not necessarily because people are panicked or there's some sense that dentistry is not a strong industry. You're going to take a haircut because your EBITDA is lower. If your EBITDA is down at 50% where it was last year, you're going to take a major haircut. My clients that are 110%, they might actually, some of them, get more than they would have got on January 1st. So it really comes down to what is going on with your individual organization. A lot of buyers out there are willing to give you a prove-it deal that basically says, look, I'll use silly numbers, Bill. We were going to give you $100 pre-COVID. You've recovered to 75, 80%. You're telling us you're going to be at 100% by the end of the summer. We don't know that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you 75% of the pre-COVID price now, and we're going to give you an earn-out and let you earn out the last 25%, meaning if exactly what you say happens and your revenue recovers, then we're going to give you the pre-COVID price. If what we're afraid of happens, that you only get back to 86%, you never get back to 100%, then you're not going to earn some of that money and the price is going to remain a little bit less. And there's a lot of flexibility, and that lets us do deals today. Because, Bill, I believe, you didn't ask me this yet, but I believe by, 2022, maybe even by the January 1st of 21, the M&A market's going to be back to normal for the most part. Like I said, I can't guarantee that they're not going to say you can't sit in a football stadium or you can't go to a bar, but we don't need that. We just need the dentist offices open and patients going to them. And I feel like probably, but clearly by January 1st, most of the uncertainty surrounding dental offices should be over with. So 2021 will probably be a very normal M&A year. But if you want to do a transaction now, not wait to 2021, and some people it's a good move to wait, but not everybody. A lot of people it's a good move to do a transaction right now. And if you want to do a transaction right now, you may have to get a little creative with the buyer and do an earn out or have a holdback. And depending on how much your practice recovers will be how much of the pre-COVID price you can recover, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it sure does. That's encouraging. So let's talk about this, because this is another question that I'm sure you're asked quite a bit. So who's best positioned right now to take advantage of this environment, right? They're going to be winners and losers. And when you look at this, can you say, hey, it's the smaller groups that are going to do well? It's the larger groups? Is it structure based? What are you seeing as far as like the DSOs that are coming to you and going, hey, Brian, we feel really good. We're going to do some deals now, or hey, we're teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. What do you think are you seeing?
It's organization-based, Bill. That's a great question, by the way. Tremendous question you asked, but it's organization-based, okay? There are big organizations that are reeling. There are big organizations that are doing great. There are small organizations that are not reopening. They're just like a solo practitioner said, that's it, I'm just not going to reopen. And there are smaller organizations that are thriving, and everything in the middle. So it's a great question. So if I was to try to answer it real quick here, like what is the characteristic of an organization that's doing well? Well, it would be an organization that was doing well pre-COVID. Okay. Nobody experienced COVID. Nobody was doing poorly before COVID, and then COVID hit and they suddenly started doing well. Maybe Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is the only example of that I can think of. The toilet paper manufacturers, maybe the hand sanitizers. They probably, and I'm not saying they were doing bad, but they were doing like average, and then COVID hit and now they're killing it. Yeah, that's great for them. But no dental service organization was like doing poorly pre-COVID and now it's just killing it, post-COVID or in the middle of COVID. They're not. So the characteristic of an organization that's doing well now and poised to do really well is one that was doing great pre-COVID. It was on an upward trajectory. They were expanding rapidly. COVID was a little bump in the road for them, but now that it's back open, they picked up where they left off. A lot of those organizations have great culture, great communications with their employees. They didn't suffer from some of the problems some of the other organizations did. Their employees were breaking down the door to get back to work. And usually they'll have access to capital, because there are going to be a fair amount of opportunities out there where certain solo practitioners and others, maybe don't want, either are going to close down and look to sell at a great discount, or just don't want to go it alone anymore. So there's going to be some tremendous opportunities in that marketplace. And if your organization was on an upward trajectory, you've got a good culture, and you've got access to capital, either a credit facility or, you've got a private equity investor. I've got an organization right now. I probably shouldn't mention their name, but they're an up and coming organization. If you come to my conference in Denver next year, you'll hear about them. They've only got 6 offices right now, but they've got great culture, a great business model. They're up to like 110% where they were now, and they've got a private equity investor. So they're signing LOIs left and right because they've got capital and there's tons of opportunities. Another characteristic, Bill, of somebody doing real well are the specialists. Remember, the specialists, the endodontists, the oral surgeons, they never really had to shut down because they were deemed emergency. If your head is throbbing due to a root canal, that's an emergency. Okay, nobody's going to say you couldn't get that done during COVID. So the endodontists were mostly reporting to me that maybe they were at 92%, 91%. I mean, nobody got out totally unscathed, but they took just a minimal hit. And I actually closed, our group closed 4 or 5 transactions in May, right in the middle of all this, because they were endodontic and oral surgery deals, and their offices were open and they were bringing in revenue. So the buyer didn't mind closing the transaction. So the specialists did well right through the pandemic and are continuing to do well. And the organizations that were on an upward trajectory, had a great culture, and now have access to capital are doing well right now. The ones that aren't doing so well are the ones that were doing poorly pre-COVID, and the ones that may have been marginal pre-COVID, but able basically to live hand to mouth, but kind of get through. Now this may have set them over the edge.
Good stuff. So This is a question that we seem to get. I'm sure you get it as well, but we seem to get quite a bit. It normally comes from the industry itself. So the dental manufacturers, the distributors, the people that are selling products and services into the space. But I'm sure this would be important to understand as a group and a DSO as well. Do you foresee, so we've seen consolidation over the course of the decades that you've been in the industry and I've been in the industry. Do we think it's going to accelerate? And if so, is it going to accelerate differently? What does that look like? In other words, do we see dentists that may not have considered partnering with the DSO going, oh my gosh, I need safe harbor. I am not going to go through a pandemic or maybe an economic crisis in the future or something else again without a partner? Do we see consolidation of groups where DSO is buying a similar size group, or maybe what do you think maybe you're already seeing it now, but tell me a little bit about what that may look like.
It's looking about the same. And let me explain. It's not quite the same, but it's looking about the same. Remember, Bill, and you know this, prior to the pandemic, it was a very robust, explosive M&A environment. So there was tons and tons of stuff going on. So if I say it's the same, that means it's very robust now. But some people were speculating, well, this is going to be the mother of all things. This is going to be like a rocket ship. Like, instead of just being a very busy, robust market, this thing is going to be out of control and lawyers are going to be staying up till 4 a.m. and nobody's going to go to sleep. That hasn't happened for this reason. Some people just didn't reopen, they just didn't reopen. It kind of surprises me because I kind of thought if you've had enough of this and you don't want to go it alone anymore, why wouldn't you affiliate with a DSO? That's a perfect match. Ironically, some doctors in their 60s just said, we've made enough money in our career. We're frightened enough. We don't even want to sell to anybody. We're just shutting the thing down. So that happened at one level. At another level, you had some organizations that are undergoing the individual fact-based determination that I'm talking about, and they've concluded, we've recovered okay, but our numbers in 21 are going to be off the charts, so let's just wait to 21 to sell. Let's just wait. And then there's a third category that says, we're doing well enough right now. Let's do a deal right now. And I think the confluence, and there is a category, Bill, of solos that said, you know what, I'm not closing down and I've had enough of this. And I do want to accelerate my affiliation right now. So you got one group of people that is accelerating their affiliation, another group of people that are just going to do the transactions they always wanted to do pre-COVID. You've got another, so those are two, what you would call tailwinds, moving the thing along. But then the two headwinds are the offices that just didn't reopen, didn't close, didn't affiliate, and the offices that are saying, we could sell now, but we think we're going to, knock the roof off this thing in 21, so we're going to wait and get a better price, at least in their mind. We'll see what happens, but in their mind, they feel like they're going to get a better price. So you've got sort of like two tailwinds, two headwinds, and it's equaling about the same level of activity we saw, at least for our group, pre-COVID. Other people, we do more volume of dental transactions than anyone else. So, we've remained busy. Some other folks in the industry that I know have reported a slight decline, since then. So maybe on an average, it's a little down from where it was, but still a pretty robust market, but not just the out of control explosion that some people were predicting. And part of that is the uncertainty. I mean, we're having a second surge of this. I think the uncertainty is never good for any markets.
Great points. And yeah, I would have guessed differently, but that's I had heard rumors that maybe the mid markets and the smaller groups may be poised better because they don't have private equity infusion and PEs scared off. So I know there's so much speculation around it. A lot of it is, I guess, like you go back to what was the group like pre-COVID? What's the culture? Maybe if they're owned by an outside organization, private equity, how do they feel about the health of the industry? Any more thoughts on that?
If you want to make allow me to make a bad COVID joke, I'll make a bad COVID joke right now. If your organization had underlying health conditions pre-COVID, it's probably struggling right now. It really is. If pre-COVID you had no underlying health conditions and you were doing very well, you're either fully recovered or well on your way to recovering right now. That's my bad COVID joke, but it's kind of applies. It's kind of the truth.
It's very relatable. Yes, I love it. Any other things that you can think of regarding like M&A markets and the industry? Like, and we talk about the future, and I want you to save some of this because I'm going to have you contribute to that article, but that we're going to do on well,
there's still a lot of competition out there, and yeah, no, I'll go into more detail if you're gonna be gracious enough to let me write an article. I always love contributing. I'll go into more detail, but for today, let me just say this: there's a lot of competition. Competition eliminates bottom feeding and some of the things. A lot of the sellers were afraid, oh my God, people are going to lowball me and they're going to bottom feed me. They're only going to do that, Bill, if there's not competition. If I'm the only guy that wants to buy your house and your house is worth $100, but I'm the only guy interested, I can walk up and offer $50, and if you got to sell, you may have to put up with my nonsense, unfair as it might be. But if there's 5 people that want to buy your house and I walk up and offer 50 and that guy next door says, well, that fool offered 50, I'll give you 60. And then the guy next to him says, well, it's worth 100. I got room to go. I'll give you 70. And then the other person says it's worth 100. I'll give you 80, and, so on and so forth. Competition, pretty much prevents bottom feeding. And there are a couple bottom feeders out there. Of course, we're not going to mention them on your, podcast, but let me just say this. They got what they deserved. A couple of the bottom feeders that ended up successfully bottom feeding bought organizations that nobody else wanted, and I think they're going to struggle, to be perfectly honest. Most of the organizations that I deal with that I'm proud to represent on the buy side, or I enjoy being opposite on when I'm representing sellers, they're just looking for a fair deal here, Bill. They're not trying to bottom feed anyone. And the reason is, this is one of the few industries where the buyer and seller have a relationship post-closing. If I've got a McDonald's franchise and I'm selling it to you, as soon as I sell it, I'm out of there. So if I engaged in, puffery and made up stuff and, inflated the price and you overpaid for it and I'm out of there, I'm laughing at you and who cares? In the DSO industry, the buyers and sellers remain in bed with each other for 3, 4, 5 years. There's often rollover interests. So if somebody deceives somebody or acted in bad faith, you got to live with that person as your partner for at least 3 to 5 years. So it's just not a good recipe for that type of funny business. And I'm very pleased that has been one aspect of the pandemic that's really brought out the best in people. The overwhelming majority of buyers are acting in good faith and just trying to find a fair deal for everybody. And the couple bottom feeders I found kind of got what they deserved, to be honest, and they're not doing so well. So that's been a very pleasant surprise in this whole pandemic.
Well, that's great to hear. And yeah, to that point, you're in the relationship for at least 3 to 5 years and possibly longer. So you want it to be a good one. So let's talk a little, this is what you really wanted to talk about. You touched on it earlier, but let's talk about the industry being shut down to begin with, how we can prevent that with this resurgence so we don't shut the industry down again. And then, what's going on from the ADA, ADSO, and then some of the lobbying efforts that have been going on to kind of prevent this, or maybe weren't going on to prevent this to begin with.
Yeah, so, the why did it happen? Because you got to understand for a minute why it happened, and then we can talk about how we can prevent it, is I think a huge opportunity was missed. And, maybe because I've been talking for a little bit, I'm a little calmer. I'm going to resist the urge to just like fly off the handle. But I feel like the ADA dropped the ball. I'll just say that. I've said that several times, not intentionally. I know the folks over there. They're good people. I'm not maligning anybody, but the ADA didn't act like a trade group, to be precise. I don't want to just say they dropped the ball. Let's talk about the problem. The problem was the trade group for the bars, the trade group for the World Wrestling Federation, the trade group for the liquor stores, the trade group for the laundromats, the trade group for the gun shops. They acted in their best interest. They didn't see themselves as crusaders for the public health. They said, I don't care if it's safe, not safe, what the deal is, we're going to keep the laundromats open. I don't care if it's essential or not. We're going to watch professional wrestlers jump off the ropes and knock people down, and that's going to be our mission. I don't care, regardless of whether it's really essential or not, we're going to let people buy guns. Regardless of whether it's really essential or not, we're going to keep, in the states where it's legal, the marijuana dispensaries open. They acted as a trade group. That's what a trade group does. It's the CDC's job and the government's job to tell us what we can and can't do. And, it's the government's job to say, I know you all want to go to the bar and get a drink, and, bars are fun and we like them too, but it's just irresponsible. You got to close the bars. Sorry. That's for the CDC and the government to do. If the liquor and beverage trade group told the bars, we're going to just, do what's in the public's interest, we're closing all the bars down, they would be fired as a trade group immediately. That liquor and beverage trade group would never function again. Now go to dentistry. What happened? The ADA said, sure thing. We'll shut down. We'll issue a recommendation that we're only going to treat emergencies, and we're going to ask everybody to shut down. I've never seen anything like that in my life. The ADA is not the CDC. They're not a branch of the government. It's not their job to tell us to shut down. It's their job to advocate and lobby for their trade. And they didn't do it. It would have been their job to have said, listen, you guys are jumping to conclusions. You're rushing to judgment. You are saying there's a pandemic going on. People are getting this. Oh my God, these people are putting their hands in people's mouths. Shut them all down. That's what the public was saying. However, as your trade group, we want to tell you that dentistry is more equipped to handle infectious diseases than most doctors' offices and even hospitals. We've been dealing with AIDS and HIV and tuberculosis and hepatitis A and hepatitis B and the regular flu and the common cold for decades. We've got PPE. We're going to issue industry-leading guidelines as to how to safely operate a dental office. That narrative you heard about just because we're sticking people's hands in their mouth, it's going to be unsafe is completely false. There's a huge correlation between oral health and underlying conditions. The studies are showing if you don't regularly take care of your mouth, you can get diabetes. You're at a greater risk for heart disease, a greater risk for inflammation, infections. The research bill is not complete on this, so I want to be upfront. It's not complete, but they are saying that inflammation generally leads to other infections being more susceptible. I'm willing to bet you just a beer on this. I don't have the proof right now that they're going to show you poor oral health contributes to the susceptibility of coronavirus. I'm willing to bet you in the future there will be a study that says that. We don't have it now. So the point is, it's absolutely essential to keep these offices open. That was the ADA's historic job. I am questioning whether they should be allowed to speak for the dental industry anymore. I know a lot of dentists that are turning in their ADA memberships and are just not, they feel like it doesn't represent their interests anymore. But the ADA's job would have been to have acted like a trade group, come up with guidelines, recommendations for keeping the office open, and advocated for the trade. Instead, what they did is say, we're just going to let this thing close down and put all of our constituents basically out of business for 2 to 3 months. And I just think, I'm going to try not to get wound up, but there's not an adjective strong enough to describe the ball that got dropped there. So how do we prevent that from happening in the future? Well, the DSO industry is a separate and distinct industry. Anybody that's in the DSO industry knows we're different from solo practitioners. I mean, it's true that the DSO industry has contractually affiliated dental offices that practice dentistry, but the similarities kind of end there. So I feel like we have to speak for ourselves. And I know, the ADSO has been, attempting to do this. Dykema's been doing it. We have Dentistry Essential campaign where we've been lobbying and advocating for clients and getting them in front of elected officials to make sure they know the importance. I'm recommending the dental industry is heavily connected. If you go to a community and you talk to some of the really good dentists in that community, they all know the mayor. They all have access to the governor. They're frequently invited to political events. Now is the time to get in front of all of those elected officials and tell them, one, how essential dentistry is, how incorrect that snap judgment narrative was, and three, the huge correlation between poor oral health and all of these other diseases, and the fact that there's not a single study that says there's a higher transmission rate of this virus or HIV or tuberculosis or hepatitis A or B in a dental office than anywhere else. I mean, now is the time because, if this surge of cases goes on much longer, it's conceivable somebody somewhere might ask the question, should we shut dental offices back down again? And that can't happen. Just cannot happen.
Right. So the industry as a whole needs to be prepared, and the dentists in particular and DSOs need to be out there advocating now to prevent that from happening, because it could happen in their state, county, city, wherever.
And you got to pressure the ADA to be on board. And here's why. Because you got to speak with one voice, right? If it with the liquor folks, the liquor stores went to the, I'm not familiar, Bill, with what all their talking points are, but they went to the governor's office with one voice, at least in Texas. And they said, this is an outrage. You better not shut these down or we're going to rain hell on you. Every single person that's part of our lobby and all the people that drink liquor, millions of people, you cut off their access, you're not getting reelected. And the governor was like, wow, I got that message loud and clear. I better leave the liquor stores open. What you can't do is have the DSO industry go to the governor and say, you better keep these offices open. Look at all these things. And then have the ADA say, no, you should close them. Then the governor's going to look and say, well, these guys don't have their act together. Some of them are telling me I should keep it open. Some of them are telling me that they can't. I guess I'll make my own decision. It doesn't really matter. We got to speak with one voice here, or it becomes really, really problematic. And, Bill, you might, like me, be starting to get sick of the we're all in this together. How many millions of times have you heard that? Well, we're not all in this together.
Hashtag we're all in this together.
Yeah, but we're not, okay? I mean, we are, like, superficially, like, look, we're all citizens of this country and, we're all susceptible to this virus and we should treat each other well and try to cooperate. Like, I'm a big advocate of wearing masks and trying to do my part. So, yes, we're all in this together on that part of it. But on the business side of it, we're not all in this together. Do you think the liquor stores or the World Wrestling Federation or the laundromats cared really whether it was safe or not? No, they cared about staying open. And the difference is the dental office, unlike a liquor store or a laundromat or, I had one of my dentists on one of my podcasts say they were able, the pet grooming stores stood open. He was able to get his dog's teeth brushed, but couldn't open up his dental office. That's how crazy this was. I don't know that any of those places can really guarantee safety, but a dental office pretty much can. Maybe not 100%. Nobody can do that. But a dental office can say, look, here's what we're doing. Everybody's got an N95. Everybody's got gowns on. Everybody's got gloves on. You're going to wait in your car. We're going to take your temperature. You're going to do a peroxide rinse. Do you do a peroxide rinse, Bill, when you enter the liquor store? I mean, no. So, the one that's the most suited to actually tell the public, this is a safe place to go. It really is, or as safe a place as we can make it, get shut down. And the other ones that I don't know what kind of safety you can really guarantee in a gun shop or a liquor store or a laundromat or a marijuana dispensary. I just don't know. I'm not knocking those businesses, but I'm familiar with those businesses like any other consumer that shops. And I don't know what they can guarantee. I do know that dentistry can guarantee a lot of safety measures.
And that's good to hear. And I will say this: I know the ADA listens to the podcast and is on our website, so they will hear this. And listen, valid points. And let's hope that we are speaking with one voice. So I'm going to end the podcast with one easier question.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's easy. I don't know. Might not be. I don't think any questions are easy during this age of COVID. But maybe look to the future and brighter times. And so, future of DSO meetings. Since you go to a lot of the meetings, you're speaking at a lot of the DSO meetings, at dental industry meetings. What do we see maybe through the end of 2020, and then what's going to happen in 2021? I know we know Dykema has their own meeting, or now several meetings virtually. So through the end of 2020, are we going to be pretty much virtual for any dental meeting? And then what does 2021 look like?
Yeah, well, we do have our own meeting, Bill, and you've been a great supporter and sponsor of our meeting. And I didn't want to get off here without thanking you for doing that. We've always appreciated your support of our meeting. But, kind of getting to, the questions, it looks to me things are just washing out, right? I'm saying for 2020, at first, obviously all the March, you were probably going to the ADSO like I was. That all got canceled in March, and then pretty much April got canceled, and then the Henry Schein meeting in May got canceled, and then things that the DEO went virtual. That was supposed to be in June, and then we of course had to cancel our meeting in July. So things are falling pretty quickly. I know that there was a couple events in September that have been canceled. for a while, I don't know if you know the answer. I'm just curious. Dentsply, Sirona said they were having their meeting. I don't know if that's changed now, but
as of Monday, I talked to them. It still is on, but
all right.
You don't know. And Greater New York,
I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I think so.
I commend them, and I commend the Greater New York for trying, and I will be there if they do it. But I feel like it may be tough, but I commend them. I really do for trying to do it. Look, if they're able to do it, that'll be great. There'll be at least 2 big events we can go to, but most of the events that I'm aware of, at least through October, are going to be canceled, or they're strongly considering cancel. I think if there's anything in 2020, it would be maybe Greater New York, maybe Dentsply, Sirona meeting, maybe the 1-800-Dentist one that we did that was supposed to be in Beverly Hills in March is now, I think, in October, maybe. I mean, maybe if we do it, we'll get 2 or 3 events in this year. I'd be grateful if we can, get them in. But I think a lot of people, based on where the cases are now and what's happening, I think there's a strong likelihood, 2020 may be a complete virtual year. But 21, I guess the wild card in all this is they're saying they may have a vaccine available first quarter of 21. If they do, that would dramatically change everything, of course. If not, I would like to think by first quarter 21, maybe we can start to do some of these things. I think what you may see is everybody's going to have to wear masks. You're going to have to install those plexiglass medians, between people. And there may be limits, like I was telling you, we were expecting 1,000 people in Dallas. We know the ADSO meeting always gets 1,400. People may put limits. They may literally say first 500 that sign up can come, or every organization gets 1 or 2 people, and that's it. And, that's it. We may just find, sort of limitation, attendee limitations, on these meetings. With respect to our event, we're going to do a pandemic-proof event, meaning if people sign up for our event, and it's going to be in Denver in July of 21, I hope you'll be there, Bill. If for some reason this thing is still going on next year, I mean, let's pray it's not, but if for some reason it's not gone by next July, we're going to have our meeting. We'll pivot to a virtual thing, so anybody that signs up for our meeting will have the security of knowing the meeting is the event is going to happen. It's just a question of, whether it's going to be virtual or real. But, I'm an optimist. I really am hoping that by first quarter of next year, we can get together in person, because you're just not effective. I commend everybody that has attempted to put on a virtual event this year. I commend and compliment them. And at least it's better than nothing. It gives us a chance to do some interaction. So I commend it. But, it's not the same thing. We can go to a meeting in person and you can have a booth, Bill. And if I want you to meet people, I can lead 5-6 people by the hand to your booth in about 5 minutes and say, hey, I want you to meet Bill. I want you to meet Kim. Come over here, talk to these folks. And you just can't do that virtually. I know they've tried these virtual rooms and things. I went into a couple of them. It's just very difficult. I commend the effort, though, but it's very, very difficult. Nothing compares to that in-person interaction. And I feel like the sooner we can get back to this, the more the DSO industry is going to thrive with the M&A and all the acquisitions that are going on, because a lot of sellers feel like they got to meet the buyer in person. They want to look them in the eye. They want to talk to them. Tons of that stuff goes on at the conferences. Virtual is just not quite the same way. But, you got to deal with the cards you're dealt, Bill, not what you want, what you're dealt.
Right. Agreed. So, I mean, listen, I totally agree. Virtual, and I commend, what you all have done with your virtual events, and DEO and everyone else that's put on virtual events and tried to create, what you're really talking about is that the ability to network, because you can still get the education online. There's no doubt about that. Education you can learn. But that meeting people, really, it's, if it's going to be a 3 to 5 to 10 year relationship, if you're partnering with a DSO, affiliating, selling your group, you probably want to meet that person or those people, meet them in person versus virtually. So totally agree. And let's hope that maybe 1 or 2 of these events actually goes live, even if it's much more scaled back. I think that would be the best we can hope for. Well, listen, Brian, I appreciate it. I really apologize that this is the first time we've actually had you on a podcast, but there's so much to talk about. We're probably going to have you come back because things are going to change and there are going to be more questions and you're going to have more answers for us and for the audience. So thanks again, Brian. I really appreciate you taking some time today.
Well, Bill, it was my pleasure to be here. Thank you, for having me on here. Thanks again for everything you're doing for the DSO industry. And yeah, have me back anytime. I'm delighted to come back. This was, an honor for me to be here. And really, I'll come back anytime you need me.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks to all of our listeners and to all the readers and subscribers to Group Dentistry Now and listeners to the Group Dentistry Now show. We will be back again with another great guest. So until the next time, I'm Bill Newman. Thanks again.
The Group Dentistry Now show has listeners across North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. If you like our show, subscribe today and please tell your colleagues about us.